Okay, welcome everyone. It's Frans Oketsia here again, and we are on the 8th webinar of 4 that we originally planned. 6 weeks ago, I ran a session in which I played a sample coaching session with Emily Nichols all the way from Toronto, Canada, and we spoke about what her purpose was, and we spoke about the very first big thing that she wanted to accomplish in terms of her business. And you will remember at that point in time, I stuck very closely to the hero's journey, and I actually worked with the content of the hero's journey. Now, tonight's coaching session is going to be a little different, and it's just so that I can demonstrate to you that you don't always have to work with the content up front. It is very possible to run a coaching session with a client and following the hero's journey, not mention it at all. So tonight's session is an example of a coaching session that was done using components from the hero's journey, but not explicitly mentioning it. And what I'll do is, just before I play the coaching session to you, I will actually talk you through the components of the hero's journey that we actually used in that coaching session. Now, just to remind you, and I'm going to do a little bit of revision since the last time we spoke about these things was 6 weeks and 8 weeks ago. Firstly, if we look at the structure of a coaching session, it's very important, and it doesn't matter which framework you use to coach, but it's very important to have a good structure to your coaching session. And the structure that really works well for me is this one. Firstly, starting off by establishing rapport with your coaching client. This is a very important step because this is where you establish trust. This is where you are getting comfortable with each other and sort of almost prepare for the real work that will follow. Now, once you've established a good level of rapport, the next important step is to contract an outcome. And the outcome is, what is it that you want to accomplish within the scope of this coaching session? And it's very important that you and your coaching client agree on what that outcome is. It is supposed to come from your client. And as a coach, you need to understand whether the scope of this outcome is sufficient to accomplish within this coaching session or not. If the scope is too big, you might want to sort of bring it down to a more manageable size. If the scope is too small, you might want to expand it. But that is something that you have to agree with your coaching client before you start doing the real work. Then once you've contracted the outcome, it's about exploring the outcome and understanding what the resources are that is needed in order to achieve that outcome. Often, working towards this outcome involves going through a creative problem-solving process, exploring different dimensions of this specific issue that you are exploring. And ultimately, once you've understood properly what this outcome is about, then you can start saying, okay, now these are the specific resources and the specific things that we need to work with in order to achieve the outcome. It is also up to the coach and the coaching client to agree an action plan. And the action plan would typically be those steps that a coachee or a coaching client will take in order to move towards achieving the outcome. It's also important in the coaching session, and I normally do this towards the end, to elicit the insights that the coaching client has had in this session. When you are working with a creative problem-solving approach, and you sort of breaking down the outcome into smaller, manageable parts that can be resourced, and a resource, it can be simple abilities, it can be things that need to be done in order to achieve parts of the outcome. And of course, achieving parts of the outcome will build up to the point where you achieve the entire outcome. And Insights along the way is what gives the coaching client the learnings they need to move forward on achieving their outcome. And then finally, what you will do is you will close the session. And ideally, in closing the session, you will create the kind of motivation and energy which will let your coaching client go from this coaching session with a lot of energy and with a lot of motivation to go and do the action steps required in achieving the outcomes of the coaching session. I also want to just briefly talk about the format of the hero's journey, which we used in our previous coaching session 6 weeks ago. And actually, this diagram goes back all the way to the beginning, to the very first webinar that we had, where we started with finding purpose. You will remember from the subsequent sessions, the focus on the hero's journey, always in context of the purpose that you want to achieve. And you will remember that in the hero's journey, there's the 3 major stages: a new hope, where you exist in the ordinary world, you receive this call to adventure, and you either accept or refuse that call. But once you accept it, you will cross over the threshold and you will go into the transformation. And the transformation is basically where the change work is done. And then ultimately, once the transformation is complete and the person on the hero's journey have changed into this person they want to be, there's a return to the world. And the world that they return to can either be the world that they existed in before, or it could be a new world, depending on how the outcome of the transformation is. This is the detailed layout of the coaching journey. And I'm just going to focus on the first couple of steps. Now, as I said before, if you work through this coaching journey, you might actually work through this coaching journey in a number of coaching sessions that follow on each other. Depending on the coaching client that you're working with, the outcomes that you set for each of the coaching sessions may include one or even multiple steps in the hero's journey. In the session that I'm going to be playing to you tonight, you will see we've actually concatenated a number of these steps. I was working with Gert Garman, and I'll introduce you to Gert in a moment. We started off and we talked about the call to adventure. And you will actually see in the discussion that we had, we spent quite a bit of time on the call to adventure. Over time, we actually came back to it a number of times. And one of the things that I did was I actually made sure every step along the way that this call to adventure was aligned with Gert's higher purpose. And once we've agreed on the call to adventure and on the scope of the coaching session, we really started crossing the threshold. And you will see that the remainder of that session was really focused on planning and overcoming resistance and strategizing how Gert could move forward into the future. And what was interesting about that is that we actually got to the point where we started touching on the road of trials as well. Now, I'm making a reference to all of these steps because you will hear in the coaching session, although we followed the steps as I just described it, at no point did I mention to Gert that we were using the hero's journey. So with other words, I was coaching her along this path of the coaching journey without using the explicit content from the hero's journey, even though in the background, I was keeping the coaching session aligned with the hero's journey. And the reason that I mention this is because from time to time, if you're a coach, you might run into the occasional client that don't want or doesn't need too structured an approach. So if you do end up with one of these clients, tonight's session is a really good example of how you could coach someone along the hero's journey without making it explicit. Okay, let me introduce Gert to you. Now, Gert Garman, she's the owner of Broad Perspective, LLC. She works out of Florida in the United States. And she previously was the director of Collaborative Design Center at Valencia College. And before that, she was working as a creativity and innovation catalyst for Disney Destinations. And she did a lot of brainstorming sessions and creative work. And she trained fellow cast members in Disney's Innovation Toy Box. And she specifically worked for Disney's parks and resorts worldwide. She has a long history of creating immersive experiences and breakthrough thinking results through her work with the City of Orlando and Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, and as an assistant athletics director for the University of Central Florida Knights. She's also certified as a facilitator in the creative problem-solving process. She's certified in ThinkX, in Foresight, which is a wonderful assessment. And if anyone's interested, I can point you towards where you can complete that assessment and learn something about yourself as a creative being. And she's also a certified facilitator of the 5 Faces of Genius processes. Gert has spent many years with the Disney Corporation, and she has a wonderful pedigree in terms of being a creative facilitator and just a creative problem solver and just an all-round great person to be around. I'm going to allow Gert to just introduce herself via the little video that she created for the ACRI conference, which is about a month away. So here's Gert.
Hi everyone, I'm Gert Garman, and as you can see, I am on an airplane heading out to my next adventure. This time I am off to Memphis, Tennessee to discuss innovation and creativity, much like I'm going to do at ACRE when I come to South Africa. I wanted to film this on the plane because many times when we're coming up with new ideas, people get grounded and they can't see the bigger picture. In my session, I will show you ways to get to 30,000 feet on the solutions to your challenges. After all, it's always easier to take a big idea and make it smaller, but not to take a small idea and make it bigger. I will also discuss how having conversations on a plane or anywhere, even at this conference, can make a huge difference to your business. This unplanned collaboration is sometimes even more meaningful. I will tell you some examples that I have witnessed or been a part of that changed someone's future. See all of these empty seats around me? These will soon be fresh conversations, and you just never know. So always invite the encounters. Inspiration can come from anywhere. Also, I will help you figure out how to keep people from bringing their baggage into a session. You have to help people start fresh and stay fresh and look at the broad perspective. It's time for me to jet. Can't wait to see all of you at ACRE. Take care.
Thank you, Gert. Let's go into the coaching session.
So, Francois, what I'm finding with a lot of my clients when I interviewed them, to see really what the needs are, right, and what their challenges really are, is that they know they want to have some kind of session, some kind of retreat, but retreat seems to have bad connotations around it. So, because when you serve on a board, or when you're going to involve board members or whatever, like people are like, oh gosh, I have to give up another day to go to this retreat, right? And so they're like, wonk, wonk, wonk. And you really, what I really want to do is get them excited about going to not a retreat, but a creative session, right? So the first thing I do is rename it. And then the second thing is like, but how do I help my clients not feel like it's going to be boring? Because it's not. I mean, my sessions are never boring, right? I mean, there's stuff you got to get to, but you can have fun doing it, right? But purposeful fun, But I think that there's a session to be built, like even a keynote for me to be built around how to make a board retreat, and I mean BORED retreat, not boring, and to convince people that it won't be boring. So that's kind of where I'm at. I want to play with this a bit because I'm hearing it more than I'm not, because it seems like there's plenty of clients that are saying that. So I'm like, well, and it was really interesting. I have a session coming up in like 10 days, and it's with a university. and it's for their foundation, so their philanthropy wing, so they're talking to donors, and they're protecting students, and just trying to give money to students and stuff. So the stuff they're doing is really honorable and it's cool. But they told me in the beginning, yeah, we don't, everybody gets weird when you say retreat. I'm like, so, don't call it that, call it something else, but then we've been working like for a couple of months to build this. It's a 2-day session, but to build it. And the guy told me the other day, he sent me a nice note this week, because we had a call, and he was just like, you know what, Gert, I have never had so much fun just planning a retreat. I can't even imagine what the retreat itself is going to be like. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. I'm going to quote you on that. But how do I get other clients to also feel the same way? So, I mean, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a question. So this, you're calling it the board retreat?
Yeah. Or the not board retreat,
the
right?
not board retreat. Okay.
Yeah.
And this, how similar is this to other work that you've done over the last few years?
Very similar, but because people don't know exactly what it is we do, it's really hard to explain. I was up at my club yesterday, which is like my working space, and there were other people at the table, 2 people I didn't know, and then my buddy Ted that I'm working on another project with. And so we started, asking questions or whatever. And so they said, well, Gert, what do you do? The one guy was a lawyer. The girl, I don't know what she does. But anyways, they were like, what do you do? And I go, well, I do creativity and innovation work. Mm-hmm. And I like to say that because it's vague enough where it starts a conversation, right? And so then people go, okay, what does that mean? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad you asked, right? And so then it starts a conversation. But unless people ask me that, they have no idea what it is that you and I do, right? And so they have no idea what to expect, and they just think it's another training or whatever, and that they're not really going to accomplish anything. They're just going to be told reports and updates, and here's the financials, and that's a meeting. That is not what a retreat should be about. So how do I create, almost thinking about the Torrance model, how do I create some anticipation around a retreat instead of like angst?
Okay, let me ask you this, and this is maybe just another question to elaborate a little. Why is this specific thing important to you?
Just because I hear it a lot. And so okay. I want to come up with a solution for it so that people don't be like, wonk, 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 we have to have a retreat. And I think sometimes people feel like they have to because, I don't know, it's just something people do. Instead of thinking about how might we collaborate while we're in there and actually work on real challenges that the client's facing, and then come up with solutions that they're passionate about and they want to work on.
Okay. Now, if we were to take this through a little coaching session, what would be a great outcome for you at the end of the time that we spend discussing this?
Some aha for me that I can then translate into an aha for them. Okay. So something almost like pardon me, like a teaser, for them, so that they're like, oh, this is going to be different. You know what I mean? So. Okay.
So if we make that a little bit more concrete, you want to go away with an aha. What would an aha look like for you?
I just think just a way. Wait, I'm going to make you bigger on my screen. There we go. I think just a way to communicate, what to anticipate, right? Instead of just, please show up. You can wear casual clothes. Yay. Because, when we get into a session, you've got the V's, right? So you've got the victims, like, oh my God, I have to be here because it's mandatory, right? You've got the vacationers, woohoo, I'm out of the office for a day, right? And I mean, or you got the voluntold, so yeah, I guess it's okay that I'm here, but I didn't plan this, kind of thing. So how do I get rid of the V's and instead get people engaged?
Okay. So, so you would like to go away with an aha, and that aha would specifically be about how to communicate and, of course, how to transform people that show up there that are not in an optimal state to an optimal state.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Good. So let's just take a step back, and I just want to ask you: have you ever thought about what your purpose is?
Yes, ever since I watched your webinar. So I think my purpose is and I'm passionate about this too, but is to ignite creativity in people, especially those who don't think they're creative at all. And everybody's creative. They just need to be properly inspired. So I think my job is to like have a little pack of matches and ignite stuff, right? And light those fires so that people go, oh, I am creative. So then they have their own ahas, right? But it's almost giving them permission to be creative and innovative so that they can come up with solutions that they own, right? My job is not to come up with their solutions. My job is to help them get there.
Yeah. So this little thing that you are, that we're going to be discussing in the session today is pretty much or very much aligned with what you see your purpose to be.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
So, but I need help. Like, I know my last name's Garmin, but I don't have a big GPS. Okay. So I need to take a different turn just so I can get to more people. You know what I mean? So usually my client doesn't communicate like, how I ignite them. They just say, okay, everybody be there at 9 o'clock and, breakfast is at 8:30. But they don't communicate what I just did for them to their people. So how might I create something where I get to reach them before they show up on the day, right? So what might that look like? Yeah.
Okay. So you're actually talking about reaching them before they even show up.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just sealing the deal once they get there, right?
Okay.
So because I use agreements and stuff, I mean, I start the sessions out. You'll see when I come to South Africa, but I start every keynote and every session out with some agreements so everybody behaves well. And then, we do some stuff to get them kind of like, generating some different thoughts. The other funny thing is I insisted that this client break people up because this is a division. And so, people, and this from your audiences, but people love to clump, right? Because they sit in their comfort zone with their same friends in the same table and blah, 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 the same seat. Well, I insisted that they break people up into cross-discipline groups. And my client was telling me, he was like, oh my God, they were like clawing at me. And I'm like, too bad. You know what? Because I got to get them out of their comfort zone. That's how they're going to come up with new stuff. And they need to have shared experiences with other people in their division. So also, I think a piece of this is how do we take the angst out of that too? Because generally I find that people, once they get in the groove of the session, it's not a problem, right? But it's just leading up to it,
Yeah. Okay, so if you were to imagine your typical audience that you're going to be working with and how they show up, and you compare it to this audience that you want to show up not bored, what would be the major differences between them?
I think when I walk into a room and I don't know these people and they've been told it's mandatory that they're there, okay? There's a bit of an attitude, all right? I want to, with this audience I want to create, I want to get rid of that attitude ahead of time. Like sometimes I'll go and carry, and I talked about this in my video that you helped me edit. And, but sometimes I take suitcases and I put them outside the door. My first thing is leave your baggage at the door. I don't care what you've done in the past, right? That kind of thing. But sometimes you got to be pretty visual about it, because otherwise they're coming with a chip on their shoulder. And it may have nothing, it has nothing to do with me because I don't know them, but it's about their jobs, but how do I knock that chip off ahead of time? So what might that look like?
Let me call you a timeout there.
Okay.
That's a pretty good description of how people show up at the moment. What would the ideal group look like when they show up?
They're excited to be there, right? They can't wait to work the room, shake everybody's hand, do everything. It doesn't matter where they sit, because I always tell people don't grow Velcro on your butt because you will be moving. And, because otherwise they're just going to sit there and be with their friends and they're not going to come up with new ideas. So, so I would love for people to just automatically go and sit with somebody they don't know, which we all know that doesn't always happen. ever. So, but just go and, just kind of immerse yourself immediately and don't bring the attitude.
Okay, so you're saying to me, when people show up, your ideal audience, they're going to be happy, they're going to be excited, they're going to automatically go and towards someone they don't know.
Yep.
And I sort of picked it up from something you said earlier. There will be a sense of expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
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 So on the one hand, we've got these guys showing up with an attitude. On the other hand, the attitude's very different.
Yes. So I think attitude is the key, right?
Okay.
So, because at Disney we used to quote Henry Ford, and he said, "Whether you think you are or think you're not, you're probably right."
Yeah.
So how do we get them to think they are, right?
Okay. So how might you change the way that you prepare audiences from the kind of audience that you have grown to expect to this new wonderful audience that you really want?
It almost makes me feel like it needs to be part of the homework that we would send to participants ahead of time. So like, what could I create that I send out, not their division head or whomever it is, but I send it to them so that they get a feel for me first, right? And for my playfulness, but also they find it interesting, and they're a little intrigued. So about the content of what we're going to cover. So it almost makes me feel like it should be a piece of the homework ahead of time, just to build the anticipation.
How would you make homework interesting, given the fact that homework generally has a very negative connotation?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it homework, right? So that's the first thing,
Okay.
and then, you have to appeal to the thinking styles. So I'd have to put something visual in there. I'd have to put, for the auditory people, some words, right? And then, I don't know, what could I do for kinesthetic people where it's something that's tactile, right? So that the pen clickers are engaged from the beginning too, so I don't know if there's something that maybe we could even send them ahead of time, that they can touch. Maybe it's a prototype of some kind. I don't know. And every group's going to be different, of course, but I don't know. This is just my ideal audience. So, we'll play in the ideal world.
Let me maybe throw that back at you. If you were someone that was invited to a retreat, what would really engage you ahead of time?
So that's a great question. I had a client earlier this year that used an infographic. They created an infographic. So it had the words and the pictures on it, but then it was cool enough and pretty enough that it could be printed out. So then the kinesthetic people would have something to touch. So it worked so well with, I can't remember who it was, one group. Anyways, but so I used it with another client. I suggested it with another client, and they created the same thing, and they loved it. So it almost makes me feel like something like that. But then that's great. So, okay, we use infographics all year. Then what does 2.0 look like, though? What do we do next year to also still engage them and excite them? So, before Disney, when I was at Disney, when we were going to do a press event to, introduce a new land or a new attraction or whatever, we always sent out press kits that were just little kits of cool stuff, right? So, that way the touchy people, the tactile people had something to touch. Visual people, you've got a box in front of you, right? And then there's enough description that the auditory people were excited. Okay. So, yeah. But I can't afford to do that press kits.
Let me ask you the question again. Now, you are the audience.
Okay.
Yeah, so Gert Carmen is going to get invited to this event.
I think I'd love to get something cool like that intrigues me. Like, what is it that we're going to cover, Then I get excited, and, it's kind of like getting stuff ahead of time that just is a teaser, but in a really cool way, right? Okay. So, yeah.
So what is it that is really cool for you?
I like stuff that just kind of makes me curious, right? So, what is it that we could send that would make me like, or something I would get that would make me go, oh, this is different, So what's this going to be about? So something that's, like that, like makes me want more. keeps
Tell
me,
me,
you
tell
know,
me about that little thing that you're getting. What type of thing is it that really intrigues you?
just something that would make me ask questions about it. So like, what is this? Like, if you get something in the mail, say, and
Mhm.
you go and it's, it says coming soon. I'll tell you a perfect story. So when I used to work in sports, okay, I wanted to have a party at the holidays for my staff because they busted their butts all year. And I was driving down the road here in Orlando and I saw a billboard and it just had a, like an olive on a little stick, like what you get in a martini. And then it
Yeah.
just, I can't even remember what the tagline was, but it was a website. And it just was like, something. And I'm like, well, who is that? And what is that?
Yeah.
But it intrigued me enough that as soon as I got home or as soon as I got to a stoplight, I was on my phone, looking it up. And then I ordered my catering from them because they intrigued me so much. I was so excited.
Yeah.
And so like stuff like that would intrigue people.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what would be, and it's difficult because our currency doesn't really translate to the kind of value the dollar has. But what would be for you something really? What would be sort of the limit of money that you would spend on something that is sort of entry level, but really is going to make people curious?
I don't think it has to be expensive, right? And the client would pay for it definitely. So I'm not
Yeah.
too worried about that. And it would all just depend on their budget. But I did something for our local paper here a couple years ago. It was a keynote, but then it went into a bit of a creative session. So it was a couple hours. And it was all about shifting gears. So
Mhm.
they ordered these promotional items that were little cars that
Yeah.
said shift on them. And they put one on everybody's desk that was attending this.
Yeah.
And so people were like, what is this? What does it even mean? Right. And it had a little set of keys with it. Right. So when they got to the session, they already were kind of curious about what the topic was going to be. What was I talking about? Right.
Mhm.
But they did it. They helped me do it. But they built the anticipation by doing that. And it was a little piece of paper that they laminated. So they didn't spend a lot of money on it. And then little, like keys that little babies have, like almost like a rattle. So they bought those, and you can buy those online. So they probably spent $1 each person. So it was not expensive at all. It just took a little bit of time,
So
but it built the anticipation. Yeah.
what would be the most interesting thing that you can do for $1 for each of your delegates at one of your sessions that you would really love to get?
I think it's my new pen.
Okay.
Those are only $1 something, but they're fun. Like the whole time I've been talking to you, I've been playing with it, and I'm
Yeah.
not even kinesthetic. I'm auditory, so I like words. But I've just been, playing with this stupid pen's hair. So,
Okay.
but you notice I'm not clicking because I'm not a
Yeah.
clicker.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's been fun.
Okay. Let me put you in the shoes of the person that you probably think is the most opposite to who you are. Yeah. And what would intrigue that person?
That's a great question. That's a hard question, Francois. Stumping me. Um, I don't know because a lot of times I don't know these people at all. What I'd
Mhm.
really like to know is like, and I don't know, but that begs a question like, would I actually get a list of participants ahead of time and then ask my client to describe each of these people in a couple words, and maybe get to know them a little better because I don't know what motivates everybody, right? And everybody's different. So it's almost like, did you ever read that book about filling your bucket and other people's buckets too? It's part of Strengths Finders.
Oh no, I haven't.
I'll
Not.
get you a copy because it's
Yeah.
fantastic and you can read it in 45 minutes. And there's exercises in the back that I've used.
Mm-hmm.
But the story that's in there is really cool. And there was a sales company, and this woman was the head of it. And every year they gave out a big award to the top salesperson. So this guy won it every year, honestly, the same guy. And so she loved, in her office, she had all these plaques and certificates and all this stuff because that's how she liked to be recognized, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
she didn't bother to listen to him at all, okay? And so so she just assumes that he would like what she liked. So she got him this big, monstrous, ridiculous plaque for winning this award. Well, he hated it. He never hung it in his office. He hated it. It didn't do anything for him. So she was like, well, I don't understand, right? Well, she had never listened to what he wanted and how he wanted his bucket filled. So over the next year, because she knew he was going to win it again, because he was just, a hot ticket. So over the next year, she did start listening, and she started talking to his coworkers. And what she found out he was passionate about was his twin daughters. Mm-hmm. So when she knew he was going to win it, she got with the wife and said, I want to commission an artist to do a drawing of your two girls, and that's what I'm going to present him with. And so when he won it, like, she presented him with this beautiful picture of his two daughters, and he sobbed at the microphone, like, accepting it. So she found out what motivated him. But, like, I don't know if I have time to do all that, right, to find out what motivates a person. But what's a shortcut version of figuring that out? I don't know.
Okay. You've been referring to people that are auditory. You've been referring to people that are tactile or kinesthetic. How do you normally divide up the world in different types of people?
Like in a session, you mean?
Just in general, if you didn't know the specific audience, what would be the representatives of people that would show up there? Almost, what would be the archetypes that you see walking in there?
Well, I have to observe first, right? Mm. And that's part of what a good facilitator does, right? As you well know, is we observe, and you can tell who's engaged and who's not, but it's digging a little deeper than that. Why aren't they engaged, right? Mm-hmm. So, I make people be off their devices so that they're not distracted. Mm-hmm. And then, but bigger than that, I just like to, so we had a thing at Valencia one time, a session, and part of it was this group that was hosting it. I was just facilitating it, but they were showing a video that they had just created. And, so she prefaced it badly, because what she said was, yeah, this is a video. We really like the pictures, but we don't think the music does much for it, whatever. And it's not relevant to it. Well, so as the facilitator, I sat back. I didn't watch the video, but I watched the group. Yeah. And at least two people at every table were tapping their toes to the music. Okay. Mm-hmm. So as soon as she was done, she's like, yeah, sorry about the music, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I'm stopping you right there. No need to apologize. I go, who liked the music? And almost the whole room raised their hand. And I was like, yeah, I noticed that because you all were chair dancing. So so I think a lot of times we assume that we know how people process. Yeah. But we could be completely off. Everyone thinks I'm visual, and I like pictures, mm-hmm. I like videos and stuff, but that's not how I process. I like words. Okay. So I often say it's like the voices in my head, but I do have voices in my head. So,
okay, let me hit you with a hypothetical.
Okay.
Let's say client says, I'm going to give you $1 million. Okay, you're going to run a session. I can't tell you how many people are going to be there, but there will be more than 50.
Okay.
Okay. You're going to walk into a dark room, and everyone else is congregating in the hall next door. You can't see them. You don't know who's attending it. But in 15 minutes from now, we're going to give you 5 minutes to really intrigue them all.
Okay.
You can't intrigue them in 5 minutes. You're out of here and we don't pay you.
Okay. For $1 million bucks, I will find a way, right?
So you're sitting in that dark hall now, and you're trying to figure out what types of people are in the hall next door. And what are the types that are coming up for you?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I don't know if I could figure out what types they are, but I would try to intrigue them, okay, ahead of time, mm-hmm. They're in the room next door, right?
Yeah.
Share a wall, yes?
You can't see anything. You can't even hear them. You just know that when you go through there, there's going to be a hall full of people, more than 50, and they're all different people. So you can't intrigue them all in the same way.
Correct.
So,
but I can get their attention all in the same way. So to start with, maybe what I would do is bang on the wall, make some kind of crazy noise, or
you can't do that. You can only from the moment that you step into the hall. You've got 5 minutes. Okay. So you have to prepare for an audience that you don't know. So how are you going to classify or categorize that audience into the different kinds of people that you would want to intrigue and make sure that your message gets to them all? So let's start with the classification. How would you classify them in your mind?
I would think probably most of them are visual people, or they consider themselves visual people, right?
Okay.
So I'd have to have some kind of, like, I need to make an entrance, like in a big splashy ass way. Okay. So what does that look like? Where they're just like, what is that? But I want to get all their attention at once. So it would have to be something noisy, and it would have to be something really big and vibrant and bright, and I don't know what that looks like, you know.
Okay, so in my head, there's visual people, there's auditory people.
Yep. And so then to find my kinesthetic people, though, whatever it is, whether I'm in a costume that's just really intriguing, and maybe it's a costume made of something like really crazy cool stuff, like, I don't know, in my head I have feathers. I'm certainly not going to be a Las Vegas showgirl, but that's what I have in my head. But something that just grabs their attention right away. But then I'll know, because the visual people will react to this, the auditory people will react to the noise that I'm making, and then those kinesthetic people will be the people who want to come up and pet the feathers, right? So, like, because they want to touch something. So what does that look like, you know? So I figure within the first 5 minutes, I can accomplish that. And then I can figure out.
So you're classifying the world basically into 3 groups of people: visual, kinesthetic, and auditory. Okay, now let's get back to your pre-engagement.
Okay.
Would those 3 groups of people still apply?
Yes. I use those 3 groups a lot because I feel like it covers off on almost everybody. There's people who are, you know, cross-pollinated people who are a little bit of all 3. There's people who are a little bit of these 2 and not that one, these 2 and not that one, you know, whatever. But basically they have a primary one. So but it's one of the 3.
Okay, so you are basically saying for me, and now I'm sort of going back to the beginning of the session, you are seeing 3 primary or 3 broad groups of people that you would want to work with. Someone that's visual, which you have to attract their attention through some sort of picture or vivid impression. There's some people that are auditory, that needs to understand the message that you are giving to them in a way that appeals to them. And kinesthetic, so there must be some sort of sense of touching, feeling.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you were to think about getting people into a session with the right attitude, what are you going to do for them that encompasses all 3 of those, or that's going to cater to the interests of all 3 of these groups way ahead of time, so that they arrive at your session with a sense of expectation and excitement?
Yeah, so I think it's and this is just you and I talking, but I would not call it this for them. But I think it goes back to the homework. So maybe, excuse me, it's about sending out a link to like a really intriguing video that I found that's going to relate back to the session and the challenges that we're going to work on. That doesn't cover off on the kinesthetic people though, but or maybe it does, because maybe it's about the content in the video, where, I don't know, like, you know, I watch videos on Facebook and, you know, all that stuff all the time, and it makes me go, oh, I could do that, you know, and it makes me go out and want to buy stuff that I can touch sometimes, right? So maybe it's kind of like that. So I'm already getting the visual stuff. There's a voice in there, so I've got the auditory, right? And then maybe it's something that provokes me to go out and want to buy something that was in the video that I can touch.
Okay.
So I don't know, maybe something like that.
Yeah. How else might you engage someone kinesthetically?
I do a whole session on prototyping. I think I've sent you that description before, but man, you know who the kinesthetic people are in a session because they will grab the pen and the paper right away. If you put fidget toys out or Play-Doh, they're the ones that are building stuff, right? So you know who they are right away. I take all the clicky pens out of the room because that makes me crazy as an auditory person. But you know, but give them. They have to touch stuff. That's how they process, right? So you know right away. So it would just be a matter of getting them something that they can touch. You know, so maybe mailing them. I mean, you know, mailing them something ahead of time, and you know, as long as they're touching something, they're happy.
So kinesthetic people either touch stuff or?
I don't know because I'm not kinesthetic. So like,
what is the one thing that in touching stuff, what is it that kinesthetic people do?
They keep moving. They fidgeting.
They keep on moving. Okay,
Yeah.
so would it be possible if you, and let's just take the example of the video, that you would engage with pictures, with voice, and get them to do something in which movement and touch is involved?
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that. And I think it would depend, but it's got to relate back to the session too. So I guess it would be different every time, you know, because it all just depends on what the challenges are that they're working on. So,
okay. So if we talk about the sessions that you run, how would you typically be engaged to do a session?
Like, how do I get a client?
Yeah. If a client contacts you, what would they say to you about the work that needs to be done?
So they would tell me about what it is they're trying to accomplish. So what success looks like at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. The first thing I do, because I'm following the creative process in my head, is the first thing I do is challenge their challenge, right? Mm-hmm. So you tell me that you're working on this and this is what you want, but it feels like that you're solving for world peace with that, and I think you're going to be very disappointed. On the other end of that spectrum, if they've already started solving for stuff, right? And so they have so many details in their challenge statement, then why do you need me? Okay, mm-hmm. Because you have to put it somewhere in the middle. So that's the first thing I do is challenge their challenge and make sure that it's in the right place on that ladder of abstraction tool. And then we can go from there. So what might that look like? And then, you know, then you have to ask them like, well, what kind of information do you have? Like where's this coming from? What insights have you gathered? You know, what information do you have? So if they've done like a climate survey or an employee survey, okay, then let's study some of this and let's make some hypotheses from that. So now do we need to include something else? You know, and following like Tim Herson's model for ThinkX, you know, you keep coming back to that itch question and you're like, okay, do we need to add something because we've forgotten like a key component here, you know, but you just have to keep discovering that. And I think the issue in with a lot of people is that they don't take the time to look at the insights, right? Instead, they're just making assumptions. And assumptions are okay, but you have to have like informed questions and informed challenges. So like make sure you're working on the right thing. Okay. You know, and ask why.
That's actually a great thing that you just mentioned there. Working on the right thing. So I am guessing that you and your client agrees on what the right thing is.
Yes.
Before you get there.
Yes.
Okay. And if you know what the right thing is, how might you decide what would be the appropriate attention getter, if I may call it that? You were talking about a video, but how would you relate your attention getter to the outcome of the session?
So A big thing that we used at Disney was we would reword challenges to make them a little bit sexier and invite different answers in, not just the same old, same old. And so I think I would have them come up with their challenge question or questions, and then we would play with the wording a bit.
Okay, is this now as part of the homework? Because I'm talking about the homework part of it.
No. So wait, I'm getting there. I'm going Lombard Street to get there.
Yes.
So
Okay.
Okay, give me a second. So I would reword the challenges, those to make them like more intriguing, more inspiring. And then each of those challenge questions, or if there's one main one, let's just say there's one main one. But then now I would take the verbiage that's in there, that's the sexiest, right? That like people spark to, and that's how I would create the homework, is based on the essence of that challenge question, but the meatiest, sexiest part, right? And then that's how I would build homework.
Okay, so you basically saying to me is, in order to get someone there in this optimal attitude that you want, you would first agree with the client what the right outcome is. Then you will sexify the hell out of it.
Yes.
And then you will go and take the essence of that and create a homework assignment.
Yes.
Okay. So here comes...
Just to inspire them ahead of time. Yeah.
So here comes an interesting one. How are you going to know that they are inspired before they get there?
That's a great question. So you're good at this. Okay, so I don't know. I would maybe include some kind of trigger. Sorry if I'm not making eye contact because I'm thinking.
Okay.
So my eyes are going up here. I'm going to this part of my brain. I think that I would have to embed some kind of trigger to know that they've read it and that they're engaged. Maybe some way for them to answer me, or send me a one-word thing. So okay, so now you've seen this video or done this homework, whatever it is. Now respond to me so that I know that you've done it, okay? But with a one-word answer or something, then that way I know that, and I think we'll know from their words too, So like the groovier their words, then I'll be like, okay, this person's in, right? Or if it's just a basic answer, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to look out for this one, kind of thing. But that gives me a feel for the audience ahead of time.
Okay, so how will you get them to respond? That's an interesting one.
So if they email, or if it's a package that we send ahead of time, they would have to go to maybe it's gonna rain here. Sorry, I'm like, it's thundering. Maybe it's a landing page or something that's created where they go and they have to engage to get X, So that way I know that they've read it and that they've done the homework, But maybe it's something that's cool. And maybe you put like a surprise and delight element to it. So of the people who respond, one of you is going to win a paid day off, or whatever it is. But, I mean, that would motivate me to freaking respond, So like, I mean, something like that, or you get a gift card for $25 or whatever it is, but you know what I mean? Yeah. So something that would get them to go engage.
Yeah.
Okay. Motivation.
Let me summarize again. Okay. So number one, agree with the client, what the objective is. Number two, sexify it, the heck out of it. Number three.
I like when you said hell better.
Sexify the hell out of it.
There you
go. Then you pick your exercise, but you're going to do it in such a way that they will have to respond to you before you even get there. And there's going to be an element of surprise and delight to it. Okay.
I like this.
Yeah. So, well, you came up with all of this so far. So
you help me.
Would that sort of get you to the point where you are going to get to the client and you're going to be reasonably convinced that they will show up with the right attitude?
I think so, because, part of my battle, because you've known me for 7 years or something. So like part of my battle is people don't know what to expect when I walk into the room, right?
Yeah.
So because I'm so enthusiastic and so all over the place, and so at first they're looking at me like I have 3 heads. So I have to get beyond that, and that's what I have to do for about the first 5 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So so what if they got to know me a little bit ahead of time, right?
Yes.
With the homework.
Yes.
Then they're not shocked when I walk in with my crazy hair and my crazy jewelry and big personality, you know. Then they're like, okay, this is kind of what I expected from this chick, you know. So like what might I do to kind of, you know, give them a vibe ahead of time so that they're not, because the introverts, well, as you all know, because you're an introvert a bit. So with the introverts, I mean,
Yeah.
what was your first, okay, I'm going to just switch this on you for a second.
Yeah.
What was your first impression of me? Like when you met me, what did you think? Because you're an introvert, so.
Yes. Look, I mean,
My feelings.
I will share this information with you. I thought you were very outgoing, very open, very welcoming, very warm person. But then again, I've also, over the years, even though I'm introverted, I've also been desensitized by my exposure to some of the real nut jobs out there.
Like me.
I'm not saying you one of them, but
you implied that, and that's okay. I wear that badge with honor.
So you're adding something interesting there. So you're saying not only are you going to give them homework that will intrigue them, but you are also going to introduce yourself to them.
Yes.
As part of that process.
Because I think I have to, Francois. And I mean, I'm just going to be completely honest. You know, sometimes people are a little taken aback by me. Well, one, and people judge other people, and we all know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I mean, I'm a short, little, chunky person, so it's like, you know, with a big personality. So I walk into a room, you know, they're thinking, oh my God, I got a crazy cousin like this. She's a lot like this one. You know, what to expect? What do I do? Kind of thing. And she ruins the family reunions because she's such a nut. So like, if I can give them a taste of me ahead of time, then I think they're not so like freaked out.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds to me like you're going to agree with your client on the central objective. You're going to sexify the hell out of it. You're going to design an exercise that's going to give them information about this session, and you're going to engage them as visual people, as auditory people, and as kinesthetic people. Plus, if that's not enough, you're also going to introduce yourself and the aspects of your personality that you would want them to be comfortable with when you show up, and even excited about seeing you show up in person.
Yeah, because I want them to be curious about me, right?
Yeah.
Like, because when we did this innovation training at Disney, we would do it in pairs, but one of us would still be teaching the tool while the other one went and put a costume on and became the client, right? Yeah. And so, oh my God, the stuff we did, I mean, Lee can tell you, like, he was always a pimp daddy, so he had a cane and a hat and all this craziness. I always had a boa, like a feather boa, and like a cigarette holder or whatever, and I was like, darling, you know, and sunglasses, the whole thing, right? And then, so people would, as soon as we walked in, dressed up, and because they already got to know us for a while, but when we introduced the client, then people were like, oh my God, what's happening here? But it got them excited because they couldn't wait to hear like what it was going to be about and how I was going to bring this character to life, you know, or whatever. So, so I think it's almost doing the same thing, but with my real personality.
Okay. So let me ask you this. In the future, when a client engages you and you agree with them the outcome, you go and you restructure the outcome so that it's sexy as hell. You've created the exercise that engages the kinesthetic people, the visual people, and the auditory people. You have introduced elements of your personality in such a way that people are really intrigued to meet you. Would that accomplish the outcome of getting people there in the right attitude?
I think it's a great step in the right direction, right? Because I don't think anybody does this. Yeah. And so, because they just say, oh, there's going to be a facilitator, and people just go, oh, yuck, right? Yeah. And so instead, I want to be like, you know, my first company, which I never did anything with, but I called it facilitators, you know, so I want to be a facilitator and not a facilitator. right?
Okay.
Something but where you play with purpose, right? But people like us, we can use humor and it's effective. Not everybody can do that, right? So why would I not take something that comes naturally to me and use it to my advantage with an audience? So
So if you do all of those things, how are people going to show up?
I think they're going to show up in a very different frame of mind. I think they're going to be curious. I think they're going to anticipate something different, whether that's scary or not, because it will be scary for some people.
Yeah.
But I think as long as you set the scene correctly, like that, and that's my job. I set the scene correctly in the first few minutes.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay. One of my keynote clients, they're out of Iowa, which you can imagine. So, I love these guys. I don't know if you ever see my Facebook posts with these guys. They're all really handsome guys, and they're all married with like 4 to 6 kids because they live in Iowa, right? Because there's nothing else to do, so they make babies. But they're fantastic guys. And they put on these IT conferences all over the country. And so they bring me in, and they like to bring me in because they call me the differentiator. Everybody else is talking about IT stuff. I'm talking about creativity. So they hired me sight unseen. They had never heard me speak. And they all lined up in the back of the room, my first speech for this IT group. And they go, Gert, we're going to be honest with you. We were scared shitless because we didn't know if we were just going to flop or whatever, because this is a group of introverts. But they were like, you had them in the first 2 minutes. And also, I think another piece of that is how you get introduced. So generally the client, whoever that is, the facilitator. So then, it's all in how they introduce me too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
so you've sort of already said to me that the outcome that we defined when we started the session is actually pretty much accomplished. And in order for you to accomplish that attitude, you're going to introduce yourself. You're going to find a little introductory exercise that you're going to send as homework that is going to be aligned with a very sexy objective, which is derived from the objective that you agreed with your clients. And you said to me, if you do all of those things, they're going to show up in a very interesting state of mind. And actually the state of mind where you want them to be: curious, engaged, and interested in what you are about to say. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've pretty much covered what we set out to do. So the next,
we did. We're rock stars, man.
Of course we are. So the next question is, what are some of the interesting insights that you sort of came to while we were doing all of these discussions and we're talking around this objective?
Well, I think it's we did a deep dive based on your questions, and you asked the right, because I don't get stumped very often, but I think you stumped me twice. So, but you forced me to really think about that and like dive a little deeper. Don't just talk about the things I always talk about, right? So then how else and how else? It was almost like you were, being like divergent and a bit childlike, right? Because you were like, well, why? And then tell me why, and tell me why, like 47 times until I did the deep dive and then came up with something very different than I normally would have.
But what's interesting that came up for you that you didn't expect?
I just never thought about it like this. Because I think, and as you well know, because you do what I do, but I think we have a formula that we follow for a lot of clients, and it's the same kind of formula and we assume just because they've never seen it, it's new to them. But sometimes I think we have to challenge ourselves too, to keep it interesting for us. So, and I think we did that a bit, and because I've never thought about homework in this particular fashion. So I like it.
Okay. Well, good. As far as the coaching part of this discussion is, I think let's bring that to a close, and then you and I can just have a normal discussion after that. But thank you very much for being prepared to do this. And
thank you.
Thank you for being so fun about it. So, I really,
you have met me. So,
and I think a lot of the people that will show up for the webinar that haven't met you will be very curious about you. If you guys want to unmute yourself, we can deal with questions.
Yes, there we are.
Okay, Sjoerd, have you got a question for me?
Yes, I was listening to this coaching session, which took quite a bit longer than the one you did with Emily. It was.
That's right.
What has your preference for dealing with coaching questions where the hero's journey is involved? Do you prefer to use the way you did it with Emily or the way you did it with Gert?
I actually don't have a preference, Sjoerd. I think, number one, I think it depends on the client that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
They like to work content-free. It is better. If they want to work with the structured framework, that is better as well. So either way is better. So it definitely depends. It definitely depends on the client. And although these two sessions I prepared, one very specifically with the structured framework, and the other one working content free, just to show that there are different approaches to this. It's about understanding what your client's preference is and then working with that.
Yeah. And would you ask it specifically or leave it out and just explore?
I think it is about exploration. I think also if you have worked with Gert a little bit, she's a very, very creative person. She likes to work in whatever way is possible to achieve her outcome. So a very structured approach probably would not have worked as well with her as it worked with Emily. Emily's background, if you remember, she's an engineer. She comes from a very structured background. So it was easier to work with her in a structured fashion. But ultimately, I think, as a coach, when you do your introductory sessions and your first contracting sessions, to a certain extent, as a coach, you have to make the call whether this is someone that you're going to work with in terms of content specific or content free.
Yeah. Yes. In my case, when I work with clients, I always let them do a brain profile.
Yeah.
So that up front, I've got more insights about how their way of thinking is. And then during the conversation, I will check on if the feeling I have about it is correct. And from that point on, I would proceed.
Yeah, one thing I can tell you though is I've actually found that if we look in your framework, someone that is sort of working as an Imagineer, it's not necessarily that they will not appreciate the good structure that a framework would bring.
No.
Yeah, so I think even beyond that, you might run into clients that occasionally you might think they are very structured, but they would like to work content free. But you might also find that people that are Imagineers might want to work with a structure. In a way, a structure will keep them aligned with what they want to accomplish. Because you know as well as I do that if you give someone with a strong leaning towards Imagineer, if you give total freedom, you're not going to get anywhere.
Exactly.
Because they're just going to float off and do whatever they love to do and never get back to the outcome that they specified.
Exactly. Now that's one of the things that I used when I was writing my books, is to first have a structure within which you are going to be free to wander around and be creative, but you do need some kind of structure within which you can express yourself.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Did I properly answer that question for you, Sjoerd?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Richard, you have a question?
Yeah, Francois, it's more of a statement. I must admire your listening skills because you listened to her very well. She was like obviously rambling with a lot of concepts and deep thoughts, and you were able to guide it in such a way, very, very astutely.
Welcome to coaching, baby.
It's a compliment. I mean, you have to concentrate. It's a job.
Absolutely. It is very important if you are doing coaching to really listen, but not only listen to the words that are being spoken, but also listening to the subtext, because sometimes a lot of things are being said in the absence of saying them, which is one of the reasons I actually like doing coaching via a tool like Zoom, because it's inoffensive to sit and take notes. Whereas if you are sitting person to person, people might get distracted if you suddenly sort of grab a pen and jot down a few notes. So that's what I like about Zoom. Zoom is just, you still have that personal connection because you're seeing the person on screen, but you also have the ability to quickly make a note without disrupting the other person. But you're right, it is definitely about intense listening and deep listening.
Yeah, I think you also need to validate, because I think you obviously have ideas coming up that are popping up in your mind while you're listening, and you need to write it down and you need to test. Because I think there is a bit of assumption, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, that you need to somehow suss out where the person's going, and you need to ask the questions at the right point.
Yeah. You may have noticed, and I know that was a long conversation to listen to, but you may have noticed that I actually fed back what she was giving to me a number of times. So as we were progressing, as we were sort of concluding our discussion, going on to about the 45, 50-minute mark, I was starting to feed back to her what she was telling me in a structured format. And I did that 2 times in a great amount of detail, and then as a consolidation a 3rd time. So the first time I fed it back to her, I was testing that I was understanding what she was saying. The 2nd time I was confirming it, plus adding a little bit extra to it. And then the 3rd time was saying, okay, so this is the solution that is going to create this outcome for you. And that was sort of aligned with the outcome that she wanted. So that worked very well.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of unconscious stuff that she's talking about. It's conscious, but it's coming from the unconscious, and you're somehow validating it for her and making it a bit more real. It's really her ideas, and but you're just bringing it into a more concrete type of validation, which makes her more comfortable with her decision.
Well, that's the whole thing about coaching, is to structure people's thinking so that they have insights that they might not get to on their own.
Yeah.
And by keeping her to a certain structure, which is the hero's journey structure, she got to a solution for herself.
Yeah. So where would you say the abyss would be? Or
Look, the abyss would be probably in the next step, when she actually starts executing the stuff, and she has to now manage the obstacles that come to it. Because if you really think, this whole conversation was about planning an approach that she could use in her workshops going forward. But now, the first time that she tries it against a real client, there might be some feedback that comes that doesn't allow her to just follow the steps that we talked about. So then it's about saying, okay, now I've got this obstacle. Something is not working the way that I thought it would. What else?
Okay.
But now at that point, she's going to have to start adjusting, and she's going to have to start making plans around what else can she do, what new resources she needs to bring in. And that might actually be a great time to have another coaching session. Says, listen, I've taken what we did in our last coaching session. I went and I tried it, and this worked very well for me, but I'm having problems with this. And that then gives you the next outcome for the next coaching session that you then work on.
Okay, so it's a series of coaching sessions which could play out different aspects of the hero's journey.
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think you explained it quite well. With it is on the journey that you are, and a journey takes time. And during the journey, you will get to certain intermediate destinations where you can plan your coaching sessions to help her through that.
Yeah. The one thing you may have noticed that I omitted from this coaching session was I didn't play the full session. Okay, number one, it was a long session. You've probably noticed that. But the thing that I specifically excluded from the recording was the beginning stuff where we really caught up with each other and we really built the rapport. But you listen to this conversation, by the time we start, we were getting on like a house on fire. So I've done all the hard work before that to gain the rapport. So I sort of started the recording that I played back for you at the moment where rapport was probably about 80-90% established, and it just deepened into that first part. And I mean, you could hear she was going on. I jumped in there after about 10 minutes and said, okay, let's talk about the outcome for the session. But that's a great indicator that you've got good rapport. If people open up, they just start talking.
Yeah, you almost can't stop them anymore.
That's right. And actually, a really good coaching session works like that, where people are just letting this flood of words come, and all you do is you gently steer them.
Yeah.
And you gently steer them, number one, through the structure of the coaching conversation, and number two, keep on steering them towards to talk through the issue that they want to resolve, to talk through the resources they want to bring to those issues, and the action points. So coaching is it's actually the absence of telling people what to do. It's really steering them through a constructive process to get to a solution for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I realize some people might say, okay, but if they do it for themselves, why do you need the coach? Well, the coach is the person that enables that whole conversation. The coach is the person that makes sure that conversation happens in the way it does.
Yeah, and then that you get that you look at it from different perspectives. That's an important part. Yep.
That's right. Yes. Just before we go, let me just sort of remind everyone out there, in about 3 weeks from now, from the 1st to the 5th of October, we're going to be running an impressive training based on the hero's journey called Awaken the Hero Within. And if you've not booked yet, we still have some spaces available. So please reach out and book. We've also got some really interesting incentives if you refer us to some of your friends and colleagues and they book and pay as well. You can go to our website at www.breakthethreshold.com and you can just go and read a little bit more about this program.